Recovery efforts are underway in Indonesia as the death toll from flooding and landslides rises to 469 people.
At least one person has been killed and 19 others injured after a Russian attack on Ukraine's Kyiv region.
Top Trump administration officials met with Ukrainian negotiators in Florida on Sunday to discuss a peace deal with Russia.
Authorities in Indonesia on Sunday reported the death toll from floods and landslides in the country has risen to 442 people, as emergency services continue their frantic efforts to access portions of the hardest hit Sumatra Island, where thousands of people were left without essential supplies. According to the National Disaster Management Agency, some 402 people were still missing after initial rescue efforts were hampered by a lack of heavy equipment. While evacuation efforts are underway, officials say that electricity and internet are now partially restored. The devastating floods and landslides came after monsoon rains over the past week caused rivers to burst their banks. The deluge tore through the mountain villages, swept away people and submerged thousands of houses and buildings in the three provinces of North Sumatra, West Sumatra and Aceh. The devastating floods also affected millions in Malaysia and Thailand, as well as in Sri Lanka, where a state of emergency was declared.
At least one person has been killed and 19 others injured in another Russian attack on Ukraine overnight. This time, the target was the country's capital region. Children are reported to be among the wounded. Firefighters worked hard on Saturday into Sunday to put out fires in residential areas in the city of Vyshgorod. Hundreds of residents were forced to evacuate. The Ukrainian Air Force reported intercepting 104 of the 122 drones launched by Russia overnight. Moscow also launched 2 ballistic missiles from occupied Crimea. At least 5 people have been killed and 39 injured in Ukraine in the past 24 hours, with casualties reported in several regions.
Top Trump administration officials met with Ukrainian negotiators in Florida on Sunday to discuss a peace deal with Russia. The diplomats discussed the 28-point plan and focused on revisions, as the plan has been criticized for being too weighted towards Russian demands. Initially, the plan imposed limits on the size of Ukraine's military, blocked the country from joining NATO, and required Ukraine to hold elections in 100 days. According to local media, the diplomats discussed election timelines and the possibility to exchange territories. However, no details were provided. The head of Ukraine's Security Council, Rustem Umerov, said he remains in constant contact with President Volodymyr Zelensky and that the negotiators are working to secure long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the talks productive and said he expected to yield progress towards reaching a peace deal. The talks with the US come at a critical time for Ukraine as it continues to push back Russian forces while Kyiv is simultaneously dealing with a domestic corruption scandal. Later this week, Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are expected to meet with Russian officials, including Vladimir Putin. Polish President Karol Nawrocki is set to travel to Hungary on Wednesday, but the president will no longer meet with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, as was previously announced. The reason, as stated by the presidential palace, is Orbán's visit to Moscow, where he secured guarantees for long-term energy supplies from Russia. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, no European head of state or government has been to Moscow, apart from the Hungarian and Slovak prime ministers. Orbán's trip to Russia was therefore heavily criticized by EU leaders. Nawrocki was set to meet Orbán in private for the first time since he won the presidential election in June. The meeting could have been a sign of a slight improvement in relations between Poland and Hungary, which have been strained due to Hungary's close ties with Russia.
Swiss citizens have overwhelmingly rejected initiative that plan to tax the super rich and introduce mandatory civic service to women. In a referendum held on Sunday, neither initiative gained even a quarter of the votes needed to go ahead. Critics, including the federal government, warned that such a tax could drive wealthy families and entrepreneurs abroad, ultimately harming the Swiss economy. The initiative planned to use the tax money to fight climate change.
Wie ich bereits im letzten Dezember anlässlich der Verabschiedung der Botschaft erklärt habe, teilt der Bundesrat zwar das grundsätzliche klimapolitische Anliegen der Initiative, er erachtet jedoch die vorgeschlagene Finanzierung der Klimapolitik aus mehreren Gründen als problematisch und auch nicht als zielführend und empfiehlt den Stimmbürgerinnen und Stimmbürgern daher, die Initiative abzulehnen.
Supporters argue that the richest individuals have a disproportionately large carbon footprint and should contribute more to climate solutions.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has asked President Isaac Herzog for a pardon amid his years-long corruption trial. The presidency called the request extraordinary and said it had significant implications, but said that it would responsibly and sincerely consider it. Netanyahu has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing, but says the trial has divided the country and claims the pardon would help unify Israel. However, the opposition has criticized the request and says it would undermine the rule of law. Netanyahu is charged with fraud, breach of trust, and accepting bribes in 3 separate cases. He has not been convicted of any crime. The request comes just weeks after U.S. President Donald Trump similarly requested Herzog to pardon Netanyahu.
Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon?
The U.S. leader had called the charges unjustified and called the case against Netanyahu a witch hunt. On the second leg of his first foreign trip, Pope Leo XIV visited Beirut in a bid to bring hope to Lebanon amid years of successive crises. The pontiff urged Lebanon to begin a new chapter and told the country's leaders that peace must not simply be an aspiration, but a daily necessity. Pope Leo XIV is fulfilling a promise of his predecessor, Pope Francis, who had wanted to visit for years but was unable to as his health worsened. Upon landing in Beirut, the pontiff was greeted by President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam. He was also given a grand ceremonial welcome. The Pope had flown over from Turkey, which marked the first leg of his trip. On his flight to Lebanon, Pope Leo XIV reiterated the need for a 2-state solution for Israel and Palestine. The pontiff recognized that Israel does not accept that solution at the time, but said the Vatican can act as a mediating voice in the region.
2 initiatives aimed at modernizing public administration and boosting more the digital transformation of Uzbekistan were announced by President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. The announcements came during 2 forums that brought together high-ranking representatives of the governments of Uzbekistan and the United Arab Emirates, foreign states and international organizations. President Mirziyoyev stressed that the ultimate goal is to transform Uzbekistan into a zero-bureaucracy country by 2030.
30 turdagi xizmatlar real vaqt rejimida olish imkoniyati yaratildi. Joriy yilning o'zida 8 millionga yaqin xizmatlar avtomatik ravishda ko'rsatildi. Hujjat almashuvining elektron shaklda o'tkazilishi aholining yiliga 23 milliard so'm mablag'lari tejalishiga imkon bermoqda.
Uzbekistan's president announced a new program consisting of 6 major tasks. By 2030, 95% of 1,500 public services will be fully digital, and the government will transition to a paperless system.
I was very impressed to find that there is quite a lot of development that has been done in the Uzbekistan side, especially with regards to the platform and interconnecting all the entities, and this can help significantly in zeroing bureaucracy.
The AI initiative, titled 5 Million AI Leaders in the Country, was launched in collaboration with the United Arab Emirates. In the framework of the project, it's planned to train 4.75 million school children and students, 150,000 teachers and 100,000 government employees by 2030. Artificial intelligence will be integrated into school, vocational and higher education systems.
This initiative will impact the development of IT ecosystem, and this is a great chance for our youth.
This project is going to benefit us so much because, as we know, nowadays AI is becoming more and more popular.
As an ambassador of this project in my region, I believe that every student has a right to use and utilize AI to increase their productivity and improve their lives.
The United Arab Emirates has announced its full readiness to support launching this national program. From eliminating bureaucracy to launching initiatives for training AI experts, the country is set to streamline services and build a more efficient, transparent government. Sarnaz Rahmankulova, Euronews, Tashkent.
Art lovers from outside Europe hoping to admire the Mona Lisa will soon have to pay more. The Louvre has decided to increase admission for non-European visitors by 45% starting in January 2026. Visitors from countries like the US and China will now be charged €32, an increase of €10 from the current price. The museum says the extra revenue is to tackle structural problems following the spectacular jewel heist last month that exposed inadequate security systems. However, unions have criticized the move, warning that scrapping the universal entry fee could be seen as discrimination. Other French tourist sites, including Versailles, are considering similar moves.